So far in this section, whenever we made an HTTP request to the server, it always succeeded. It always returned us a success response. But of course, when interacting with server, there is a lot of things which can go wrong. For example, you might not have an internet connection to send the request, or you are sending a request to the server with some invalid data, which can result into an error. Or maybe your server fails for some reason. Maybe it's offline or there is some problem on the server itself. Or you're not authenticated to send or receive data from the server. So there are dozens of things that can go wrong when making an HTTP request to the server. So if I go to our Angular application, in here, whenever we click on this fetch task button, it is going to make a get request to the server and it is going to fetch all the tasks from this task collection of this database and it is going to display it in the UI. Now this is possible because when we created this database, at that time we selected the test mode. So when we selected test mode, we enabled test mode for this database, which simply means that we are providing read and write access to everyone. That means anyone can read data from this database and anyone can create, update or delete record in this database. For performing these operations, the user need not to be authenticated. Now, how does this database, this server knows that it does not need to authenticate any user in order to read, create, update or delete records in this database? Well, if you go to this rules tab, there you will notice that we are defining some rules here. Basically, we are setting this read and write property. So here, this number which you see, it is basically a timestamp which corresponds to this date, 14th of December 2023. And current date, it is 22nd of November 2023. So here, current date is less than this date, this timestamp. So this expression here is always going to return true. In the same way, this expression also, it is going to always return true. So here, instead of writing this condition, we can also set it as true because we know that this expression is always going to return true. So instead of using this expression, we can also set it as true. We can do the same thing for write also. Okay, so since we are setting this read and write to true, any user can read data from this database and any user can write data into this database. But if I go ahead and let's say if I set this read property to false, in that case, no user can read data from this database. The user can write data to this database because write is set to true, but no user can read data from this database. Even if the user is authenticated, since we have set this read property to false, that authenticated user also cannot read data from this database. So if we go ahead and if we publish these changes by clicking on this publish button, so the changes have been published now and these are the new rules. So we have disabled read operation on the database, but write operation is enabled. So if we go to our Angular application and from there, now if I try to fetch all the tasks, if we try to make a get request to the server, you will see that we are only seeing this loading indicator. We are not seeing any data. And if I open developer console here, in the developer console, you will notice that an error has been logged. And if I expand this error, first of all, this error is of type HTTP error response. And here you can see the error code. So the error code says permission denied. That means the user does not have permission to read data from the database. Here you can also see the status code of the response, which is 401 unauthorized. And you can see other details related to that error. You can see the error message here. So here we have the message property, which is storing the error message. Okay. Now the end user will not come to know about this error because the end user is not going to check the developer console. He is only going to see the UI. So in the UI, we are only showing this loading indicator. We are not showing any error message to the user. So what we need to do here is we need to handle this error and we need to show a meaningful error message to the user. So let's see how we can handle an HTTP response error in our Angular application. And there are several ways in which we can handle an error. So let's see one of the ways. So let's go to VS Code And there we are making get request from within this fetch all task method. So from within this fetch all task method, we are calling this get all task method of this task service, which is going to return us an observable. So if I open this task service here, and if we go to get all tasks, here you see we are returning an observable, the observable which this map operator is going to return us. And then we are subscribing to that observable here. So if the observable returned by this method, if it is going to return us some data, we are handling that data using this next callback function. But if the observable returned by this getAllTask method, if it returns us an error, we can handle that error by passing a second callback function to this subscribe method. So in the observables lecture, we have learned that to this subscribe method, we can pass three callback functions. The next callback function, which we use to handle the data returned by the observable. Then we can also pass a second callback function to this subscribe method, which is the error callback function. And we use the error callback function to handle any error returned by the observable. Then the third callback function is the complete callback function, which we can pass to this subscribe method. And the complete callback function is used to handle the complete signal. So when this observable returned by this getAllTask method, it is going to return us some data. We are handling that data by passing this first callback function. But if that observable is going to return an error, if it is going to emit an error, we can handle that error by passing a second callback function to it, like this. Okay, and this callback function, it will receive the error object. So here I'm simply calling it as error. You can name it anything. Now, when I have passed this second callback function to this subscribe method, you will notice that this subscribe method is striked out. That means it is deprecated. That's because in the newer implementation of this subscribe method, we cannot pass callback functions like this. Instead, there, what we need to do is we need to pass an object like this. In that object, we need to specify the callback function name. So the first callback function is the next callback function. So here the next will be a property, and to this property we need to assign a function. So let me copy this function from here and let me assign it to this next function, this next property. Then we can specify another property, the second property called error. Okay, and to this we need to assign a callback function, the error callback function. So let me cut this one from here and let's assign it to this error function. And now we don't need this comma. And now you will see that we don't have any error, and this subscribe method is also not striked out. Okay, so the first callback function is the next callback function, and the second callback function is the error callback function. And we use this error callback function of the subscribe method to handle any error returned by the observable. All right, so as we learned, the second callback function is also going to receive the error object which has occurred. And for now, what we will do is, let me go ahead and let me create a property inside this dashboard component class. I'm going to call this property error message, and this error message property, it is either going to store a string value or it will store null. And initially, let's assign it with this value null. So initially this error message will be null, but if some error has occurred while making a get request to the server, in that case this error callback function will be called, and inside that callback function, let's set this error message to the error message of this error object. So on this error object, we have already seen that we will have a property called message. So we want to set that error message property with the error message from the error object. With this, if we save the changes, if we go to the web page, now you will notice that in the console, no error is being logged. So in this way, we are handling the error. And when we are handling the error, we might also want to hide this loading indicator. So for that, here, let's also say this dot is loading equals false. Save the changes again. Let's go to the web page. Okay, so when I click on this fetch task button, if it is not able to fetch the data from the database, that loading indicator has been hidden and it says no task has been created yet. But we are still not showing any error message to the user. we are still not showing that some error has occurred. So in the UI, we also want to show an error message to the user. For that, what we are going to do is we are going to show a snack bar here with the error message. And for this snack bar, I have written some HTML and CSS. So for the HTML, I'll copy this div and let's go back to VS Code. And in the dashboard component.html, inside this div with this class dashboard item container, let's go ahead and let's add this div. Okay, and on this div, if you see, I'm using this CSS class SB and SB error. Let's also go ahead and let me copy the CSS. Okay, and let's paste it inside the dashboard component.css. So after these CSS, let's paste it. And if we go to the web page, the snack bar will look something like this. So here we want to show the actual error message. And where are we storing the error message? We are storing the error message in this error message property. So let me copy this property name. Let's go to our dashboard component.html. And there, instead of showing this hard-coded text, there let's use the string interpolation syntax. And inside that, let's specify the error message property. So whatever error will occur, we want to show that error message. Let's save the changes. Let's go to the web page and let me close this developer console here. So here you can see the error message. Okay, now what I also want is I want to hide this snack bar after, let's say, 3 seconds. So for the 3 seconds, it should display the snack bar with the error message, and after 3 seconds, it should disappear. It should disappear automatically. For that, what we will do is, let's go back to dashboard component.ts, and after we have set the error message, okay, after that, let's use this set timeout function. And here let's set the timeout to 300 milliseconds. That means 3 seconds. So what we want is after 3 seconds, we want to set this error message to null. So here let's say this dot error message equals null. Now why I am doing this is because now, for now, let me close this task.service. So now what we are going to do is on this div, we are going to use ngIf directive. And to that ngIf directive, we are going to assign this error message property. So this error message property, it will store either a value null or it will store a non-empty string value. So when the value of this error message will be null, null is a falsy value. In that case, false will be assigned to this ngIf and this div will be removed from the DOM. But if this error message contains a string value, any error message, in that case, that string value, which is a non-empty string value, it is truthy value. And in that case, true will be assigned to this ngIf. And when true will be assigned to this ngIf, in that case, this div will be rendered in the web page. So either this error message will be null, in that case, this div will not get rendered, or this error message will have some string value. In that case, this div will be rendered. So here, when there will be some error, this error callback function will be called. In there, we are setting the error message to the message property of this error object. So this error message will have some string value. In that case, this div will be displayed. And after 3 seconds, we are again setting this error message back to null. And when it will be null, this div will be removed from the DOM. Let's see that. Let's go to the web page. Okay. So you see, we are seeing this error message and after 3 seconds, it is gone. Again, if I try to fetch tasks, you will see this error message and after 3 seconds, that error message is gone. That snack bar has disappeared. All right. Now, currently, this error message which you see here, it will not make any sense to the end user. So what we want to do is we want to show some meaningful error message to the user instead of showing this encryptic error message. Let's see how we can do that. For that, let's again go back to VS Code. Let's go to our dashboard component.ts. And here, after this fetch all tasks method, I'm going to create a new private method. And let's call this method set error message. Okay, and to this set error message, we are going to pass the error object. Let's simply call it as ERR, and it is going to be of type HTTP error response. So in the console, we saw that the type of the error object was HTTP error response. And in order to use this HTTP error response, we also need to import it from Angular/common/HTTP. Okay, and now that error should be gone. Now let's specify the body for this method. So for now, what we will do is we will simply log this error message. So here let's write the console.log statement and let's try to log the error, this error object which we are going to receive here. And now let's call this set error message from within this error callback function. So after we have set the error message, let's simply call this dot set error message. And to that, let's pass this error object. All right, let's save the changes. Let's go to the web page. Let me open developer console. And here you can see that HTTP error response object logged. So this is our error object. And in that error object, we have this error property. And in that error property, we have another error property. So this error property is storing an object. And in that object, we have this error property, which is set with the error code. And the error code is permission denied. So we are going to check if the error code is permission denied. In that case, we will show a friendly error message saying that you do not have permission to perform this action. So let me copy this error code first. Let's go back to VS Code, and in here, let's write the if statement. And there, let's say if ERR. So this ERR will be our HTTP error response object. In that ERR, we have the error property, which is again an object. And in that object, again, we have the error property. So if that error property, if it is equal to permission denied, in that case, we want to set this dot error message to something like you do not have permission to perform this action. Okay. And now here, let's simply remove this line because now we are setting the error message inside this set error message function, which we are calling from here. All right, with this, let's save the changes. Let's go to the web page. And now you see we have a friendly message. You do not have permission to perform this action. Okay, let me close the developer console here. Let's remove this console.log statement. We don't need it. So in this way, if we want to handle an error returned by an observable, so we have already learned that all the HTTP methods, for example, this get method, this delete method of this HTTP client, then this post method of this HTTP client, all of them are going to return us an observable. And that observable can return us some data, it can return us some response, or it can also return us some error. So if we want to handle that error, one way to handle that error is to pass the error callback function to the subscribe method, like we are doing here. Here, we are passing a second callback function, the error callback function, to this subscribe method in order to handle any error returned by this observable, the observable which this getAllTask method is going to return. Because from within this getAllTask method, if you notice, we are returning an observable. So this get method, it is going to return us some response. On that response, we are using this map operator, and this map operator also, it is going to return us an observable. So that observable we are returning from this getAllTask method, and we are subscribing to that observable inside this fetchAllTask method of this dashboard component. So if that observable returns us some error, we are handling that error by specifying this second callback function for this subscribe method. Now, if I go to taskservice.cs, here, when we are making a post request, or when we are making this delete request, or when we are making this put request, we are subscribing to the observable returned by these methods in the service class itself. In case of get method, This get all task, it is returning as an observable, and we are subscribing to that observable in the component class. So that's why it is easy to set this error message in the component class. But in case of other methods, in case of put, delete, and post, we are subscribing to the observable in the service class itself. So here we can of course pass the second error callback function to this subscribe method in order to handle errors returned by these observables. But the thing is, we want to set the error message to this error message property of this dashboard component. So here the main thing which we need to do is whenever an error occurs, we need to pass that error object to this dashboard component. Let's see how we can do that in our next lecture.